Home? Home. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So let me go. Yeah. Wait. Home.
Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'll be talking about the ending of For All Mankind Season 3, and this video will contain spoilers if you haven't seen Episode 10 yet. Back in Episode 6, Mars Mission Commander Danielle Poole is talking about her experience for people back on Earth. She says, "I think it's a primal urge in all of us, the need, the drive to explore. It doesn't matter how old you get, human beings are always gonna want to see what's over that next hill." And that is a big part of what this show's about. There's a moment in the For All Mankind Season 3 finale where President of the United States Ellen Wilson invokes JFK when she tells her Vice President, "We didn't do these things because they are easy, but because they are hard." She's defending NASA and space exploration in general, while he's defending the Republican Party from things like gay astronauts and a Russian-American love child. The VP is there because her closeted gay husband convinced her that having him on the ticket would help her gain vital political influence. And he wants her to resign because when faced with a scandal over an affair by that same husband, she came out publicly as gay. It's all rather complicated and difficult, and it's just one of the many things that happened to jeopardize future space exploration in Season 3. One thing that For All Mankind has always shown us is that for as difficult as it is to go to space, it's worth it. It's given us a cast of complicated characters willing to put themselves on the line to make that happen, and a timeline that's changed enough to make it believable that these projects could still exist. By the end of this season, we have 3 space programs working together in the middle of a disaster on Mars. And it feels like it all might be coming to an end. The sacrifices, the problem solving, the setbacks, the highs of people being their best for something bigger than their own survival, all the things that make a show like this so engrossing, it's all hard. And if there isn't the right people and the will to keep it going, then it all could be cast into the dustbin of history. By the time we get to Episode 10, that will is starting to deteriorate. And just like it is in Ellen's presidency, the future is uncertain. The other thing the show tries to show us is that when you put aside the personal beliefs, the politics, the prejudices, and the natural competition of things, people do generally come together to triumph in the face of adversity. The early part of Season 3 was about the 3-way race to Mars between state agencies NASA and Roscosmos and the upstart private firm Helios. The accelerated timetable and the effort to get there first leads to several problems once they get there, and in the end, none of them even have the distinction of getting there first. Instead, the lone survivor of a secretly manned North Korea mission, Lee Jung-gil, became the first man to step foot on the Red Planet. The finale opens with a montage of his arrival and his lonely existence trying to make contact with home. I wasn't sure about the feasibility of him being there or what it would lead to, but regardless, watching these few minutes helped to remind us of how difficult this all is. And for what it's worth, I think they made a case that it is in fact possible, even if it was unlikely that he'd be able to survive. He's unable to make contact with Earth, and he eventually makes peace with the fact that this is a one-way trip, and he's about to take his own life when Rover 1 shows up. His hardware turns out to be more essential than he is, but this does have the potential to complicate things if Mars does become colonized. The fact that he's there doesn't become a priority because the astronauts on Mars already have one. Kelly's condition has gotten worse, and the doctor says they have a 24-hour window to get her to the Phoenix to deliver the baby, or they could both die. Everyone at the base and everyone on Earth is working on the problem because they have too much weight and not enough fuel. The solution for the weight problem is that everyone besides Kelly will stay behind. She objects to this, but one by one all the crew members volunteer in the first of many uplifting moments peppered throughout the finale. It'll be rough, but if they implement strict rations and their crops continue to produce, they should be able to survive the 1.5 years that it'll take for Sojourner 2 to get there and bring them home. The fuel problem is more complicated because they still only have enough to get 95% of the way to the Phoenix. The problem is going to require some out-of-the-box thinking to solve, and as they're working it, Margo notices Aleida is distracted. She pulls her aside for what will be their last one-on-one conversation. She explains that she already knows about the FBI investigation, and when asked, she promises that she'll explain why she helped the Soviets later, because right now they need to focus on the problem at hand because there's lives to save. What Aleida doesn't know is that her mentor found out about this when the head of Roscosmos, Miss Katish, came to offer her a way out. Because of the way things work out in the end, it's not entirely clear if Margo intended to explain what happened or not, but the promise of that is enough to get Aleida's focus where she needs it to be. When they return, she comes up with the idea to make Kelly the second stage and to have her propel herself the rest of the way to Phoenix. They'll strap what's called a PMU to her, which is essentially a jetpack, with all the extra fuel tanks and everything else that they have on hand to give her the extra push she needs to make orbit. There's a great moment after she introduces the idea where she gets asked the question, "I'm sorry, are you suggesting we light Kelly Baldwin up like a rocket?" And she just gives the deadpan answer, basically. Ed lays out the plan to Kelly, and in doing so, does a great job to explain things to us as we're watching. The other part of it is that she'll have to be on top of the ship, so he'll have to pilot it, and that means he'll have to try to land with almost no fuel. The way this conversation plays out, it makes you fear that Ed may be signing up for his last mission. Of course, he would never let anyone else do this. He wants to give his daughter and unborn grandchild the best chance they could have, and you do get the sense that he'd be okay with making the ultimate sacrifice if it came to that. He puts the best face he can on it and assures her that he's got the best pilot he knows to help them out. He's talking about Molly Cobb, who hasn't played a large role in this season. I assume this is due to the actor having scheduling conflicts, and while I would have liked to see more of her, the absence really added to the impact of her walking into mission control. She gets a standing ovation, which she quickly quiets down before asking to speak to the Queen of Darkness. It's a great full circle moment when Margo greets her. There is history here. Molly tried to pull a power move when Margo was out of town. She came back and fired her, but after the tension's been established, they quickly get to work. It's nice to see things fall back into place, for everyone to be where they're needed and doing what they do, and they even address their initial argument when Molly says Ed wanted someone there who'd had their ass on the line. Because this was such a big dispute, throughout the season there was this question of who was the better choice for commander, and to this point Danielle had shined in that role. But in the end, when it's all hands on deck, Ed's skills also proved to be indispensable, and he even got to show off the language skills he picked up during the war, when he's the only one who can talk to the North Korean. And the acting and everything I just mentioned was absolutely top shelf. Molly's entrance and her attitude, Margo's reaction, and the little smile that Ed had on his face before he revealed that he could speak Korean. While the press is assembling to report on this mission, Jimmy and his NASA Anon friends park a van outside JSC. They give him a task that he doesn't go through with, and when he returns, he realizes they're not there to steal another statue. He gets spooked after he sees some weapons in the van. He tries to call Amber, who doesn't pick up, and they knock him out and tie him up. Karen manages to get looped into this storyline when Amber calls her after she listens to Jimmy's message. In the type of sequence we've come to expect in the For All Mankind season finale, we watch as all the different stories reach their conclusion simultaneously. Danny tries to volunteer to pilot the MSAM over his guilt for the mining disaster. When Ed brushes him off, he admits that it wasn't just that he was high or it was an accident, but that he chose not to act because he was angry and a mess. Ed rightly tells him he won't put his daughter's life on the line so that he can try to absolve himself. He sends him away to do his job and promises him there'll be a reckoning when it's over. At JSC, Margo goes up front and addresses everyone working in Mission Command. Only she knows it will be the last time she'll ever do this, and there's an added layer that Aleida is the only other person that knows about the FBI investigation. She brings up being there for Apollo 11 and Gene Kranz's words, "The future is ours to fight for and win." She says he was right then and he still is today, and then breaks a little when she tells the crew what an honor and privilege it's been to work with all of them. They cheer, thinking she's just talking about this mission, but we see that Aleida realizes this is the last time she'll see Margo do this. When she hands the room over to her, we know this is a real passing of the torch. When she walks out, there's so much history that pours in. It's a bittersweet end for someone who really did give her whole life to the space program. We had seen that the intelligence services managed to get Sergei and his family out of the USSR in a video call, and know that for all her efforts, she won't be able to outrun the consequences of her mistakes. She goes back to her office and plays the piano, and we cut to Happy Valley getting ready to strap Kelly to the top of the MSAM. We see that she's wearing a modified version of Alexei's suit. There's a last-minute exchange of I love yous between her and Ed, and then there's just an absolutely perfect bit of television. It looks amazing, the music puts you right there with her, and even though I never feared that they might kill Kelly and her unborn child, the satisfaction of her knowing she's going to make it when you see her smile as she approaches the Phoenix is short-lived, because Ed still has to manage a ballistic descent. I must have watched this 10 times now, and from the moment she separates to the smile stretching across her face, to Ed's relief knowing that no matter what happens next, he got his daughter to safety, it gets me every single time. There's no time even to process that though, because Karen is outside of JSC, and when she tries to call Jimmy's phone, she notices that his friends have it. She'll find him tied up in the back of the van and see that it's filled with explosives. When the terrorist sees her, he detonates the bomb remotely, and it destroys the building and kills her. Jimmy survives to find her in her last moments. Inside Mission Command, we see Molly helping survivors get out. Later, we'll learn that she will also lose her life while she's doing that. Aleida goes looking for Margo and finds that half of her office was sheared off in the blast. As the camera pulls out to show the devastation, we presume that she thinks that Margo was killed. On Mars, Ed survived his crash landing and is able to walk away from it. Unfortunately, when he returns to Happy Valley, Danielle has to tell him that Karen died. We get closing shots of Aleida and her family at Ground Zero, Kelly on the Phoenix with her newborn. Danny is exiled to the North Korean ship to live away from the others while they wait for Sojourner 2. Ellen goes to see Pam. We get a shot of Sergei to see that he's settling into his new life in America. And then we jump to 2003, where we see Margo in a Moscow apartment by herself. Everything is in its right place by Radiohead plays as she looks out the window and the season comes to an end. Season 3 was about going further than humans have ever gone before in our timeline. The race made it possible to get there, but also set things up for disaster. As humans, we're in a situation where wherever we go, we bring our problems with us. And that is fertile ground for drama. And I think what stands out about this finale is that while everything I said at the beginning holds true, that drive to explore, the difficulty of that, the complications and events that could conspire to bring it all down in an instant, in the end, people can come together and try not just to overcome the adversity, but build something brand new together. In the end, there's a short voiceover with Aleida recounting the voyage of the Mayflower. As it focuses in on Happy Valley Base, that thing that's been born out of the disaster of the race to Mars. She says, what was once a group of strangers, voyagers seeking a better life, had become something different, something more. And in the unlikeliest of places, they found a new home. That's the bit of hope that this show, which is essentially a sequence of near disasters, just can't shake. Going into this final episode, it was hard to imagine how we might get further missions to Mars. And now the rest of the crew who made it out have a year to survive and to start the first colony on the Red Planet. That's the kind of thing that this show does that I keep coming back for. This had some amazing moments like you'd expect, but I like this finale slightly less than Season 2's for a couple of reasons. The show has a way of introducing things that can feel insignificant at the moment, but then circle back around and deliver a big payoff. I mean, most of Aleda's story in the first season felt like an interesting but unconnected side story, and now it all makes a lot of sense. Season 3 still had a lot of that going on. I think Ed's story is the best example. I saw grown men crying in the comments because their favorite space program avatar wasn't the first person to land on Mars, but I think that only added to the ending, which was about him redeeming himself as a father. Sure, not being first on the moon is something that's haunted him, but as we learned when he was buried in the Hab, so was the way he left things with Shane before he died. For him to be there and be essential in Kelly making it to safety on the Phoenix, and to know that he was okay with sacrificing himself if it came to that, makes him come out of this season as even more of a boss, and he got to do what he does best and live to tell the story. Margo and Aleda also had a fantastic season, even though it was hard to watch at times. There are obvious parallels to her mentor Von Braun, but we understand her character much better and can see how she ended up where she did, while knowing that her intentions were mostly pure. She put everything she had into making space exploration what it is in this timeline. And that little bit of her human nature she indulged in, falling in love, led to places she couldn't come back from. Aleda will be a great replacement though, and it was fitting to have her final act in the US be getting Sergei and his family to safety. Karen and Molly's deaths hit unbelievably hard, although Molly's was almost a blink and you'd miss it situation. The way the camera lingered on the man she saved watching her walk back into the smoke stood out, but if I hadn't paused to look at the paper, I might not have put things together in my first watch. When I finished, I honestly wondered how many people might miss that. Karen's death felt like a complete shock, which I guess was the point, and I suppose if you think about it, her arc was complete. When you have a show that moves so quickly through time, it makes sense to deliver these dramatic endings rather than have these great characters just sort of fade away. But one minute she was about to step into the CEO role at Helios, and the next she's just gone. Both of the actors here gave great performances. They brought these characters to life in a way that they're both really memorable, and they're going to be missed. And geez, my thoughts are really just with Wayne after the way this played out. I loved how they came together and how Molly gave her the "I'm a selfish prick" speech. That added to her hero's ending and aligned her with the show's thesis. Yeah, she has been a prick at times, and that's been fantastic to watch, but she's also been selfless when she needed to be, and that's what she's doing in her final moments. I've been critical of both Jimmy and Danny's stories this season, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but in case you haven't been following along, in my opinion, these were the weakest elements of this season. They did manage to make Danny's situation more sympathetic, but only after they exhausted me with the whole thing. His bad behavior did add a lot of tension along the way, but I mostly just wanted him to go away for it rather than wanting to see him come back around and redeem himself. The banishing seems like a fitting ending for how things played out, but it's a temporary one that feels a little dangling since we know that it'll be in the past by the time the next season starts. And I do want to mention that even though I didn't like a lot of what they gave him to do, Casey W. Johnson did a great job in the Hab and in that last moment where he comes to Ed to salvage something with his performance. It's a little bit worse with Jimmy because I'm not even sure how we're supposed to feel about that. He didn't know what his friends were up to, and you can see how he was sucked in, but what happens next? Is he the lone survivor? Do they try to pin it on him? Or does the fact that he has hero parents and that he was a victim in all this mean that nothing happens to him, that he just turns things around and that's what we're going to be seeing next time? I honestly don't know, and this is a part of the bigger problem I had with this ending. I like the hope, and I like that space exploration will continue because of this series of unexpected events. To bring things full circle, there's the parallel of Ellen saying maybe the Republican Party needs some destroying, and the fact that JSC is literally destroyed in an attack that has a lot of similarities to the Oklahoma City bombing in our timeline. Sometimes it's in the reaction after a crisis or catastrophe where change can happen, but there are a lot of things left up in the air, so it doesn't feel as neat. It doesn't have that feeling of everything falling into place that you got at the end of season 2. And to be fair, that's a pretty high bar, so by no means am I saying that this wasn't enjoyable or that it was bad. The highs were absolutely high, and that's enough to keep me coming back. When it's doing what it does best, there really isn't anything else like it on TV. I guess we'll have to wait and see how they handle the transition to know if it'll make sense. I had been worried about the lack of likable new characters, and I do think that Kelly and Will certainly are a good starting point for season 4. Deb ended up having a pretty satisfying arc by the end of the season, and with Karen out of the way, I'm sure we're going to see more of him. Everyone else is getting old, a little too old, and that makes it feel a little slim. But hey, with Margo and Moscow, we'll finally get to see things from the Soviet perspective, which is something that's been lacking in this show. And we'll get a ton of new characters there. It is something to look forward to, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Let me know in the comments what you thought about Season 3 overall, what you thought about the finale, and what you're hoping to see in Season 4. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.